Hey there, what's going on? My name is Basir Payenda. Welcome to Project 20 of 100 Web Project series. And in this video, we'll be creating this draggable slideshow using HTML, CSS, and vanilla JavaScript. It's also draggable in touchscreen devices as well. And there are going to be a bunch of techniques and tricks that we're going to be using that in here, what we have used that in our previous videos too, to create this slider here and the one that we created in second project. Alright, so without any further ado, let's get started. Here I already have my code data opened. I created the HTML, the CSS and JavaScript files, linked them all together just to save some time. And here right at the top you can see there is a link or the CDN for the Font Awesome 2. You can get that from the official website or just go to cdnjs.com, search for Font Awesome and get this link. Alright, so for the HTML code, everything is going to be wrapped within a slider. And within this slider, we're going to have a wrapper called that as slides, because I'm going to be adding all of these slides within this. Okay, so span.slide, and within that, we're going to have an image. So right here, what you can see, here we have an images directory. So I'm going to be using that. These are a bunch of images that I got from nsplash.com. So just pick one.jpg and then just duplicate it down below. So this is going to be pick 2.jpg, pick 3, and then pick 4. Alright. And then also we need to add those previous and next arrows as well. So it's going to be prev and it's going to go nowhere. And fa is fa-caret left. Okay, so this is going to be the button for the previous arrow, and then one more, let's call this next. So this is the next arrow here. fa is fa-caret right. Okay, and then save it, and if I run this in live server, okay, so this is how it is all gonna look. It looks terrible. We're gonna fix it using CSS. Okay, now in style.css, first I'm gonna get everything, add a box sizing of border box. Then for the body, let's set the margin to be 0, get rid of the default margin, split this as flicks, and similarly justify content to the center, align items to the center, and add a minimum height of 100 vertical height for that. Okay, and then down below, we also need to style the slider as well. Okay, so the slider is gonna have a position of relative here, and that also is gonna have a width of 992 pixels and gonna have a height of 768 pixels here. Okay, and also need to add some styling for the images as well. It's gonna have a width of 100% and a height of 100% to fit the container of it. Okay, so this is the slider, and then let's see how's that gonna look. Okay, so this is how all of these are gonna look, and now let's also style the slides here. And this is actually a wrapper for all of these slides right here. Okay, so we're gonna get that slides, and then we're gonna position this as absolute. From the top, that is that is 0, from the left that is 0 as well, and that also is going to have a transition for all 0.4 second is in and out. And then also we're going to set a cursor for this. In this case I'm going to call that as pointer. Alright, and for all those slides, actually we need to do one more thing here. We need to add a width for this, like 10,000 pixels. Okay, and then also display this as flicks. Okay, 10,000 pixels, because all of these images that you see right here, these slides, they are gonna have a width of 992 pixels. So there's gonna be 4 of those. That is like 4,000 pixels. It could be like 5,000 pixels. Yeah, no problem. So since this is a wrapper, it needs to have a bigger width. All right. Then for the slide, they're all gonna have a width of 992 pixels and a height of 768 pixels. Alright, now if I just go back here, now you can see that all of those are next to each other. Alright, and now we're gonna also add some styles for the previous and for the next arrows as well. So I'm gonna say previous and then next here. They are both gonna be positioned as absolute from the top 50%, and then let's also transform and then translate y this to minus 50% here, and then add a color of white, and I don't know what else do we need, font size 4 rem, and then go back here. Okay, so you can see this is right here. Let's actually put both of these side by side like this. Okay, so now what else do we need to do is to put this to be right here. Okay, so the next is gonna have from the right like 4 rem. Okay, that looks better, and for the prev it's gonna have from the left 4 rem space. There we go, so now it kind of looks good. Let's also add one more styling for the active one, in case if the user is clicking on that, it's gonna change its color to be some kind of darkish color there. So now if I click that, there's a little bit of effect there. Okay. Alright, so we are done with this point right here. Now let's go back into script.js, and in here I'm gonna get the previous button. That is actually I need to add an ID for both of these. And this is gonna be an ID of prev right here. I like to give it an ID whenever I'm referring it in JavaScript. Okay, so document.get element by ID, and then let's get the previous arrow, and then similarly this one is going to be for the next arrow here. Okay, so next.add event listener, on click I want to run a function which I will call that as switch slide, and then next. Okay, so obviously this has to be called within this arrow function, and then duplicate it down below, and it's going to be for the previous slide. Okay, let me actually maximize this though. Alright, now for the switch slide we need to create this function switch switch slide here, and then this is gonna take an argument, and then it's gonna check if the argument is equal to next, then this is gonna actually go to the next slide. And the way that it's gonna go to the next slide is that first it's gonna get the slides. Okay, so back into index.html, I can use this slide here, this one, but I rather prefer to add an ID for this and call that as slides, and copy that out. In the script.js I'm gonna say slides this equal to document.get element by ID of slides there. So we got the slides there, and let's also get, this is slides container actually. I'm gonna call this one as all slides. Alright, so document.query selector all of the slide. There we go. And also we need one more thing. This is gonna be the slide width. Okay, so all slides, I'm gonna assume that all of those slides are gonna have a fixed width that's gonna be identical for all of those. So offset width, and I'm gonna get the width of the slide, and assuming that all of those are gonna have the same width. Alright, so now in here it's gonna check, this function is gonna check if the argument which is passed there, if that is equal to next, then it is going to take the slides right here. This is the slides container dot style dot lift, and then set this to be equal to next slide. And the way we can define this is slides dot offset lift here, and then minus slide width. There we go, and save it. And if I just go back into here, let's just maximize this, and then if I click that, this should go to the next slide. As you can see, it just slowly goes from the first to the next slide like this. Alright, I'm gonna go back into here and style the CSS. Actually, I added this transition, I'm gonna get rid of that, and then actually add it this way, slides.transition. Alright, you'll get to know that why I'm adding this class right here in a bit. Okay, transition all 0.5 second is in and out. I think this is very much 0.3 seconds. 300 milliseconds is enough for that. Okay, so back into script.js. So this is where we checked if this is the next, but other than that, if it's not the next argument, then we're gonna get this one right here, and this time we're gonna use plus. Okay, so now back into here, and let's just go to the next slide and this one, and then if I click that, this should go to previous slide. Alright, so this is really working nice. And if I just go back into here, you might be wondering why we are subtracting it and here we are adding it, because slides.offsetLeft is either going to be 0 or a negative value, and that since this is a negative value, negative and negative, they are kind of add together, just a simple math. But when this is negative and this is plus, then something is going to be subtracted actually. Okay, so that's the reason why we are using it this way. And that next I'm gonna add that transition class for the slides container as well. So I'm gonna say slides.classlist.add the class of transition. There we go, save it. Make sure this is transition, yes. Okay, so now if I just go back into here and click that, you'll notice that there is a smooth transition between those. Okay, why is that? Yeah, it's working. All right, so we are now successfully we are able to go between first and last slide. But notice that when I click that again, so you might say that the default behavior should be like, if I just reach the last slide, I want it to jump from the last slide to the first slide. And when I'm reaching the first slide, I want it to jump from the first slide to the last slide. Alright, so the same trick that we use for this carousel right here, we're going to be using that trick. So in order to add that nice transition, and that we should be able to dive from the last to the first and first to the last, we're going to actually clone this slide at the last and the last slide to the first. Okay, so for that we're gonna need a bunch of variables, which first one is gonna be the first slide. So that way all slides, here we go, and this is gonna be the slide 0, this is the first slide, and then we also need to get the last slide as well, all slides again, and then all slides dot length. Okay, so this is gonna get the last slide but -1, since we have 4 slides, and it's gonna return 4, and -1, that's 3, so this is the index of the last slide there. Also we need to clone this first slide. Okay, so clone first slide, that's equal to first slide dot clone node. Okay, and set and pass through in there, then constant clone last slide, and then say that last slide dot clone node and pass in through. Okay, so I got a little bit of node prepared right here. There we go. So yeah, I don't know where did I take this. I believe it's from MDN. So this method is going to create a copy of a node. Okay, so if I just go back into here, we get the first and last slide, then we clone them. We're gonna create a copy of that, and the reason for that is because we're gonna append the first slide to the end of this one right here. Okay, so slides.append child, and then if I just pass in clone first slide right here, then you'll notice that the first slide is cloned at the very last right here. And similarly, we're gonna clone this last slide to the first right here, and the way we're gonna do that is again slides.insert before. Okay, so I'm gonna say insert clone last slide before first slide. Okay, and then save it and go back into here. Now you can see that the last slide, which was this one, is now cloned right here. Alright, I'm noticing some weird behavior for the arrows as well. If I just refresh that out. Okay, we're gonna be fixing it anyway. Alright, we're gonna fix that. Okay, so back into style.css. I believe that's because the width is a little bit small, I'm gonna go back with 10,000 pixels. Let's see if that fixed it. Yeah. Alright, so now it looks good. From what you can see, we cloned the last slide to the first and first slide to the last. Now back into here, in order to start from the first slide, we need to specify the left for the slides to be minus 992 pixels here. Okay, so this way it's going to start from the first slide, and if I go back here, you'll notice that here we are at the first slide. Alright, so back into script.js, now we need to check the index. Alright, so by index of the slide, I mean that if we are reaching the last slide here, we want to go to the first slide, and when we are clicking the previous button right there, we want it to go to the last slide. And the way we can do that is I'm gonna create another variable and then call that to be, okay, actually I'm gonna create it down below right here and call that to be index. Okay, index of 0. There we go. And we'll be using this index in order to track the last and first slide, and through that we're gonna jump between those. Alright, so now in order to keep track of every slide, we need to use a trick, and that trick is fairly simple. Slides.add event listener. So you remembered from the switch slide function here that we added a class of transition for that. Okay, so now we're gonna listen to transition end. Okay, so transition end, when the transition gets ended, then we're gonna call this check index function here. So basically this function is gonna check the index of the slide. If it is more than the index of the last slide, then it's gonna jump to the first slide, and here is how it can do that. So function, then check index. Alright, and then down below right here, we're gonna check that if the index is equal to -1. Okay, in this case, the user is trying to click this. Okay, now the index is -1. Then we want it to go to the last slide, and the way we can do that is, again, I'm gonna just copy this out and paste it right here. So slides.style.left, and then right here we're going to specify the length of the slides. Do we have that variable created already? No, we don't have that created. So constant of slides length here, that's equal to all slides dot length. There we go. So this is going to return the length of all the slides. In this case, that is 4. Okay, so instead of this, I'm going to add this slides length here, and then multiply that by the slide width. Okay, multiply it by slide width. Okay, this is gonna return 4, and this is slide width, which is eventually going to be 992 pixels. Okay, so now what's gonna happen is that if I just click this, alright, sounds like it is not working yet. Okay, let's see. Check index is gonna kicks in whenever the transition ends on slides right here. At event listener, a transition end. Alright, and then yeah, we need to also add this negative value to the very first part of that as well. And then if I just click that again, okay, let's inspect this in the console, which we are. Okay, there are no errors in the console too. And then let's go back into here. It's gonna call this check index function. It's gonna check if index is equal to -1. Oh yeah, there we go. I forgot to actually increment it in here. Okay, so yeah, it is necessary that whenever we are clicking the next button, we have to increment this index value, so it goes hand by hand with the index of the slide as well. Okay, then duplicate it down below right here, and it's gonna be minus, okay, decremented by 1. And now if I just go back here, let's see, this time it should work. There we go. You see that we jumped right from the first slide to the last slide, and we want similar behavior if the index is equal to if the index is equal to slides dot actually we have slides lint already prepared. Okay, so slides lint, and then let's just duplicate it down below right here, paste it, and then this time it's going to be only 1. And you can guess that why it is 1, because this slide width 992 pixels, and we are just diving right at the first slide if the index is equal to this one right here. And there's one more important point as well. You can see that right here we are going to the last slide, and still the index is at its last place. We need to obviously set the index to be equal to the index of the last slides. In this case, slides length, which is going to be 4 minus 1, and that's now 3. Okay, and then duplicate it down below right here, and then set this to be equal to 0. There we go. And now if I just go back here, now click that, we are in the first slide, go to here, and then similarly we're going to go to the last slide, and then there we go. Now if I just go back into here, into style.css, and then if I add an overflow for this one, set this to be hidden. And now if I just go back into here, zoom this out a little bit, like 100%, there we go. And if I click that, you can see there is a very weird behavior here that has to be fixed. Okay, screwed up a lot of it. Okay, so we're gonna fix that as well. Alright, so now I'm gonna comment this out once again, go back into script.js. And now the thing is that whenever we are adding the transition for the slides in switch slide, we want this to be removed whenever we are checking the index. Like literally when the transition ends, we want this transition class to be removed as well. So now if I set that to be removed, just believe me, that's gonna solve the problem we had earlier, or you saw that earlier there. Okay, let's just actually go back and comment this out and comment that, and then if I just go back here, click that. All right, there we go. Now you see that that weird problem is gone now. All right, yeah, it really works really nice. All right, now let's work on the other aspect of this slideshow here. I'm gonna comment this out once again in the script.js. All right, let's see what else do we have to do. Okay, I don't think there is anything left. Okay, now we're gonna work on the other aspect of this, and that is to make it draggable and make it work on touchscreen devices. Okay, so for that, again, I'm gonna say slides.addEventListener, add event listener on mouse down. Okay, so we know that dragging happens as a result of 3 events. That's mouse down, mouse move, and mouse up. Okay, the moment when user is pressing the button down, is moving their cursor right and left, and then mouse up when the user is leaving the cursor. Okay, all right, so when the mouse is down, we want to call this function called drag start. Okay, and then similarly duplicate it down below. We're gonna add some events for touchscreen devices. Touch start, basically whenever we are starting to actually touch the device. Let me see where I have those definitions here. There we go. You can pause the video, read it all yourself. Basically, touch start, this event is gonna occur when the user touches an element. Touch start when the user is touching that element, when the user is moving that, and similarly touch cancel. Okay, where is it? There we go. So, and this is touch start. Then we have touch move, and for touch move, I'm gonna call this drag move function here, and then we have touch end. Okay, touch end. Make sure this is lowercase and it's not uppercase, by the way, and then drag end. All right, so we created all these functions, and now let's create drag start here. So drag start is gonna take E here, and then we're gonna be using this event quite often here. Prevent default, there we go. And then right here, you can see that this drag start is called in two places, one for mouse down and next for touch start. Mouse down is for the desktop screens and laptops when the user is dragging it toward the left side and the right side. In touch start, basically it's gonna kick in or fire whenever the user is using a touch screen device, right? Alright, so I'm just gonna comment these two, and then for the touch start, I'm just gonna copy that out, and I'm gonna check actually that if e.type is equal to touch start. That means if the user is using a touch screen device, then we're gonna need to actually specify a bunch of other values right now. Okay, I'm gonna just comment this out, go all the way up above in here, and then call position x1. We're gonna create all of these variables, x2, the initial position, and we're gonna need the final position as well. Alright, so what is the x1, x2 initial position and the final position? Again, I'm using my tool here. Okay, let's just delete this, and then alright, let's zoom this out a little bit. Assume this is our slideshow, and we are touching it. Okay, so the moment I start to move my hand on this here, this is position x1, then we're gonna move it toward here. We want to go basically to the previous slide. So this one, what you see right here, this is x1, position x1, this is position x2. And if you're moving this from here back to somewhere like, let's say here, then this is gonna be position x1 and this is position x2. Basically their positions are changed. Now how do we translate it into code? We're gonna do that. And also the initial position is gonna be the initial position of the slides container. Where is it? Yeah. And then final position, this is the final position of the slides container. Initial position is gonna kick in when we start dragging, and final position when we are into it dragging, or in other words, when on mouse down, this is initial position, which has to be specified, and final position is gonna be specified when on mouse up, or when we are leaving the mouse. Okay, I hope that it makes sense. Alright, so I'm gonna uncomment this out right here and specify the position x1. Okay, position x1. So position x1 is going to be the x coordinate of where the user is touching their device. Okay, in this case e.touch 0.client x. Okay, so this client x, this is going to return the x coordinate of where the user is touching, and this touch 0, well, this comes with the event right here, and this touch, it's going to return an array of the places where the user touched the screen. 0 is going to be the very first one of that. Okay, and then else. Okay, this one was for the touch screen devices, and now this one right here, actually I'm going to duplicate it down below right here, and then this is for laptop or desktop screens. Alright, e.client x. Now we specified the position x1. Okay, and then in here we also need to specify document.onMouse up to on mouse up. We're gonna call this drag in function, and then on mouse move we're gonna call this drag move function. Okay, I'm gonna uncomment these two. Alright, so now we have created it, and if you remember when I was explaining these four variables, I said that initial position is a variable that has to be specified in drag start. Okay, so here we can specify slides.offset left. Okay, so this is gonna return the offset left position of the slides relative to its offset parent. You know that the offset parent of the slides, it is slider right here. Okay. Alright, so we are now done with the drag start. Now let's work on drag move. Okay, so again create another function, drag move, and then it's going to take e as an argument as well, and then checking that if e.type, if it is equal to drag move, excuse me, that's touch move. Here we go. So now from what I said earlier, we're going to define the position x2 because at first we just clicked it. So we start to drag from here to here, it's going to be position x1 and this is going to be position x2. So we have to specify the position x2 here. So the position x2, that will be equal to position x1 minus e dot touch 0 dot client x. There we go. And then back again, position x1 is going to be equal to e dot client touch 0, oh god, I can type, dot client x. There we go. So again, the same thing what we did in drag start, we are checking if this is a touch screen device, so we can specify the coordinate. Okay, and similarly right here we are seeing if this is a touch screen device. If it is, then we are going to set the x coordinate, x1 and x2 coordinates respectively. All right, so now in the else part, we're going to do the very same thing. I'm going to just duplicate it down below, move it all the way up until here, and then this time I'm going to remove this touch 0 right here because it's not a touch screen device, and in else section this is going to be called whenever we are dragging it in a laptop or desktop. Okay, so this is the position x2, and then here down below I'm gonna call the what is that, slides dot style dot lift, and then specify that to be, and then set the position pixels as well into there, slides dot offset lift here minus position x2. There we go. Okay, so the reason why we are subtracting it from position x2 is that because position x2 is going to show as exactly the distance from where the user started to drag and then ended that dragging. Okay, so here basically the user where they started the drag, and then here is when the user ended that drag, and still he is dragging. All right, it's not ended yet, drag end is not occurred. Okay, so in this way we are dynamically going to change the position of the slides from its lift position, and this slides dot offset lift, as I said earlier, this is always going to be a 0 or a negative value. All right, now let's write the function for the drag end. Okay, I'm really sorry, one more thing, that I cannot actually show how these functions are going to affect this slideshow unless I complete all of these functions, because this drag start, drag move and drag end, they all work hand in hand with each other. Okay, so once they are done, then I can explain it better what's going on. Okay, so then for the drag end function, so when dragging is finished, there are basically 3 possibilities. I'm gonna comment this out actually here. 3 possibilities. Okay, the first possibility is that maybe the user is going to go to the next slide. The second possibility, maybe the user is going to go to the previous slide. And the third one, maybe the user is going to go and stay still. Okay, so that is what we're going to be specifying it right here. Again, as I was explaining all these 4 variables in here, I told you that this is going to be specified in drag start, and the final position, this is going to be specified in drag end right here. Okay, so I'm gonna say that final position is then equal to slides dot offset lift. There we go. So this is the final position now, and now I'm checking. This is going to be a very simple if condition. We are checking it for the next slide, then for the previous slide, and whether the slide has to stay still or not. Okay, so in this case, if final position minus initial position, which we specified that earlier in drag start, if that is less than minus, this is a threshold. You can specify it whatever you want to, but my way of doing it is that I'm gonna open the calculator, and then 992 divided by 2, that's gonna be 496. I'm gonna just copy this out and then use this as a threshold. Okay, so if final position minus initial position is less than minus 496, just pause the video, think about this. It's very simple. Okay, so basically the user has the intention to move to the next slide. If that is the case, we're gonna call this switch slide from here, and then call and pass the next argument into there. So that means the user has the intention to move to the next slide. Else if final position, which is right here, minus initial position, if that is greater than 400, that means the user has the intention to go to the previous slide. Okay, so then we're gonna pass prev right here. All right, and then for the else, what I said earlier, that the user don't want to go anywhere, they just want to stay still, so no problem. In that case, the slide is gonna go stay right where it is. Slides.style.lift, that is equal to, and then we already specified that it's going to be initial position with the pixels at the very end of that. Okay, I'm sure there's going to be some part that I have screwed up. Well, yeah, and that includes this one. They both should be same threshold. Let's see if our code is working so far. If it isn't, then we're gonna debug that and fix it. All right, now if I just move it, okay, you can see that I can move that. It's working nice, but still got some problems with that. Okay, so yeah, one of the problems I noticed is that here when the dragging is ended, okay, so you have noticed that when the drag started, we specified these two things here. Now that dragging is ended, then we just want to simply set both of these to be null. Okay, what happened? Yeah, just choose both of those and replace both of that with null. Okay, so in this case, this should work a little bit better. Now I'm gonna go back into here. Yep, and then go to the first slide. Now you can see it is working a little bit, however, it is a little bit baggy. And the reason for that, I guess I know why it's still baggy. Baggy, is that the right word to use for this? All right, so now there's one more thing. Here the slides.offsetLift, this is not going to work this way. We need to actually change this to be the initial position. Okay, so I'm going to choose both of these to be initial position, because right now we added this dragging functionality to that. Okay, so items.offsetLift is going to screw up certain parts. And since initial position is not specified whenever we are clicking the next and previous arrows, okay, so this initial position, from what you can see here, this is specified only whenever the user is pressing the mouse down or whenever the user starts to use the touchscreen device to move toward the left and right side. But other than that, it's not specified when the user is using arrows. So for that, we're going to use a little bit trick right here. I'm going to just add a comma and then pass in dragging right here. Okay, and then there's going to be a second argument. I'm going to call that as arc2. So right here, I'm going to check if no arc2. Okay, if no arc2, then right here we're going to say initial position. So initial position is going to be equal to items dot that is slides.offsetLift. There we go. Just save it. And now if I just go back into here and then I move it, there we go. It kind of works really nice. There we go. So we are going from the first slide to the second, third, and fourth. Okay, now back into here. There is one more problem. If I just click this real fast, you'll notice that we are out of range. And now in order to solve that problem, we need to create another variable, and that this variable is going to be called like can I switch. Funny name. I'm not good with naming. Okay, so can I switch? I'm going to set that to be true by default. Okay, so let's call this can I slide actually. Yeah, a name that is pretty much self-explanatory, like can I go to the next slide or previous slide and so forth. So that is gonna kick in whenever it is true. Can I slide? There we go. So if it is true, then we can go to the previous slide, to the next slide, and so forth. But if it is not, then we can't. and obviously in check index we need to specify that can I slide to be equal to true as well. And then when we are done with that, we are done with switching off the slides, I'm going to specify that to be set to false. Okay, there we go, and then save it. And if I just go back into here again, let's see if I just click this. Okay, now no matter how fast I click this, it's always going to work really nice like that. You see that? Now we are not going out of that range there anymore, and this is working nice as well. Yeah, there we go. And then if I just go back into here and style the CSS, and if I just comment that out, and then if I go back here and zoom this a little bit, like let's say 100%, it's gonna go to the next slide. Yep, and then if I click that, it's gonna go to the previous slide, and then I can drag it too. Okay, yeah, there we go. It just works really nice. Alright my friends, so that was it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, turn on the bell notification for more videos, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you for watching.